Drusilla and James Hendricks were from Kentucky. They joined the church, but they ended in Nauvoo. And, they were going to Nauvoo. And they probably went to Missouri. And anyway, before the Hans Mill, there was a battle at Crooked River, and that's where James was shot. And Drusilla said, "Don't get shot in the back." And she came home, and he must have got shot up here somewhere. So when Brigham Young came, well, let me start one other thing. So she had a hard time. She did everything to make money, and their home they still have a home in Nauvoo that we have seen, the James Hendricks home. Mm. It's been restored and everything. So she was so blessed. People would, someone come in and said, "Sister Hendricks, I have a pig I'd like to sell you." And she says, "I just can't. I just can't take it." And by night time came, and he came back and he said, "I can't sell it. I want you to have it." And then other times she'd get so low they didn't have hardly anything, and she'd clean her house because she was not going to leave a dirty house. And before night, someone would bring her things. She had so much faith. I mean, the Lord just blessed her. So Brigham Young said the Mormon battalion was going, and William wanted to go. He was 16. Her next boy was only 14, and then she had younger girls. And how can I let him go? He said, "One that has to help me. James can't do anything, with his I guess he was crippled all his life." And so the morning the battalion was leaving, she went out and milked the cow. And she had a voice say to her, "You let William go. You will be blessed." So she came back to the house, she says, "I felt just like Abraham sacrificing Isaac." Because I thought, how am I going to get along with my oldest boy going? But she let him go. And he got to Utah before then. And William and Drusilla came in I can't remember which company, but he was a bishop in Salt Lake for 19 years, even in this crippled situation. Then William Doris moved to Richmond, and he became the mayor and first stake president, everything. And there's a big monument to W.D., they called him. But she, like I say, we went to Nauvoo, and it had her name on a monument and quoted her. And we went to Winter Quarters, and it talked about her. And one day I gave a piece in church about ancestors, and this lady came up to me and she says, "Doreen, BYU has a show all about that includes Drusilla's story." And Holland has told her story in a general conference before.
William Doris is James and Drusilla's son. Right?
Yeah.
They call him W.D.
Yeah, W.D. But he married a Hendricks. So that's why we have Hendricks. Otherwise, we'd be on that side, but we have Hendricks on this side. Grandpa Lafayette's parents, the home that Grandpa and Grandma Lafayette lived in was his father's home. His father was a freighter, like Grandpa Skidmore was. And he went to Mexico as Grandpa's mother died. And so he was a freighter, and he died in Mexico, my great-grandpa Hendricks. And they had to bury him. Mexico had a law that you had to be buried in 24 hours. And my grandpa Hendricks always wanted to know where his dad was buried, but we never knew. So that was always sort of sad. Yeah. So, and then on the website, my grandma Elizabeth Elena Webb Hendricks. See, my dad's middle name was Webb, and my great grandpa Eli had lots of land in Richmond, And now, where his farm was, where his home was a big development in Richmond. And my grandma had land. She had land along the highway and down, and we used to, Grandpa would have some cows, and he worked at Seco Milk. He was their cashier. And Dad we'd go, Ruth and I had tromp hay. We'd do some hay because they had these cows. And that, but Grandma inherited. And in fact, the home where my folks bought was my great aunt Lucy and great aunt Flossie and Grandpa Webb left it to them, and they sold it to my folks for $1,500.
Wow.
And that's where I was raised. We moved in right after I was in first grade, and then we hadn't moved in too long, and then during the Second World War, we moved to Portland. My dad went to Utah State. Well, my dad went to Utah State as a young man. And then he went to took welding, and we moved to Portland, Oregon. And I went to 5th and 6th grade in Portland, Oregon. And so the folks had bought the home, and they rented it out while we were. And I used to think my grandpa and Grandma Hendricks, Leif and Lizzie, were rich because they had a piano and a fridge and a telephone. And, when I was young, we didn't have those, we had this home without a bathroom. And then when we bought the home, they bought the home from Lucy and Aunt Lucy, and then we had a bathroom. But then we just barely got in it, and Grandpa he left Mom alone. He went right about my birthday. And then he stayed up there till he came home in May, and we drove to Portland. And then like I say, then I went to 5th and 6th grade in Portland. And downstairs, I still have shoes from Portland. It was so rainy, and they had big wooden soles and a leather top.
Wow.
And that's what you wore, And so that's one of the memories I have. But we got home. The war ended in August. And we came home in September, and Dad had a hard time finding a job, and he opened a service station. And so most of my growing up years, he had a service station, and I'd have to go down in the summer and stay while he ran the bank and pumped gas, and I hated it. I just kept paying. No one would come in because in those days, you washed every windows and you did that, and so but I did. That's what I did. I learned to drive on my dad's service station lawn. And I'd ride my bike down there, and then I'd go up and back down. And so I learned to back as good as I went forward because I only had this little bit of grass to go on.
When did you meet Grandpa and all of that?
Well, and I graduated in 1951, so I was never in high school with him. We're only 3 years apart in school. In age. 3 years apart in age. But when I was going to school, the deadline was October 31st. So I was almost 7 when I started school. And he got in school before he was 6. So that's why he was that much ahead of me in school. So we had two wards. The Richmond South Ward was where I lived, and Richmond North Ward where Dad lived. And I knew who he was. I don't know that he knew me, but my dad had a service station. He knew my dad. And I graduated, and I worked a year before I went to college, and I spent all my own money. My folks did not work at Seco Milk where Grandpa Hendricks did. And so that was neat. And then I decided to go to college, and I only went 2 quarters because my money was going fast and my folks didn't have it. In fact, when we were when I was working, this girl I worked with, I went back to Seagull Milk after I quit college, and she had been to the Hilcamora mission, and she says, someone says, you ought to go back there and see that pageant. And Louise says, I would love to do it. And she bought a new car. And so 6 of us drove back. And I paid Ruth's way, my sister's way, to go.
Wow.
It was Louise McCary.
I know it was, Louise McCary. And so that's why I got to go to the Skidmore pageant, because we went in 53, I think. And I was, and then Bill and I got engaged that fall, and then we got married in 54. So that's one of my neat experiences, was to go to the Skidmore pageants and go.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say marry me.
We got to, we stopped in Kirtland and Nauvoo. We stopped in all the church history places. So it was really a fun trip. It's a fun trip. I always wanted to take our family back, but it's a long ways to drive.
It is.
It was a long drive. So did it have a pretty big impact on you, Grandma, going to the pageant?
Yeah, it was really, it was a really fun experience. And to say I'd been there, and to go to Sacred Grove, and to go to Nauvoo, and I always thought Nauvoo. I just thought, how would I have left all that homes? They're so beautiful. How would I have left them?
Yeah.
I think it's amazing that a group of Richmond girls drove all the way back there by themselves.
Yeah.
And then you said Grandpa knew who you were because your dad had a service station.
Yeah.
But when did you guys start?
What happened is they put me in drama director, and so the 2 Richmond wards were going to put on a play.
It was a stake.
Bill, I'm telling about something else.
Oh, okay.
So I was drama director, and we had a play, and the Smithfield ward wanted to see it. So Dick Skidmore was in it. So we went down, and Bill took us. Bill drove us down to put this play on. And so we did, and then we dated once or twice, and then went for a while, and then in 53, probably the summer of 53, we started dating quite a bit, and then he went in the service. And he went to, and he came home in October, and we went up to Blackfoot to see his cousin Isla.
You didn't say anything about the Benson State play.
Yeah, we had this Benson State play, and he was John the Baptist one year, and I was the prompter. And then the next year, he was in the service, so he couldn't be in it. But that's sort of, we got talking and different things.
Mm.
Yeah. And so then, when he came, so then the summer.
I couldn't be in it. I was in it. I was in the play.
Yeah, for the 1 year, but we put it on 2 years.
You put John the Baptist on 2 years?
Yeah, it was called. It was called something with
Men of Galilee.
Men of Galilee. So then, in the first of 53, he went in the service for a while.
In June.
He went and he got home in October, and we went up to Blackfoot to see Isla. And we was talking on the way home, and I said something. He says, "Well, I would like us to become engaged if you would."
Wow.
It's pretty bold to come by.
Yeah, especially with him going overseas. So I came home, and it was I guess by this time I was working a bunch of clinic, and I had Tuesdays off, so that was it. So I came home, and I just thought, Dad will never go to work. My dad, he's never going to go to work today, and I want to talk to Mother before I go, because the plan was I would call Bill before I went to work and tell him he had been engaged to another girl, and she gave the ring back, and so he turned the ring in at Needham's Jeweler in Logan, and so he had this credit. And so he finally went. My dad finally went to work, and I asked him I told Mother what had happened, and she says, "Well, it's gonna be a long time, a year and a half, because he knew he'd be overseas a year and a half." And she says, he's just a wonderful man. I don't think you'd do any better, and you're not the first one to have go in the service. So I called Bill up and I said, "We'll come to Logan. I'll meet you at noon." So he come to Logan, and we went over to Needham's and bought this ring.
Aww.
And they sized it.
Uh-huh.
And I went home, and like I say, then we went home, and that night I had another state thing I had to be at, but I hear I was engaged. And my dad said, he looked at it and he said, "You're not going to keep it, are you?" Well, he's afraid that I was going to have a hard time being home,
Mm-hmm.
But I had the advantage of Kay was home. Kay was riding back and forth to college then. She was home. And, the gleaners, that was what the young adults were called, the gleaners and M men, and we just did lots of stuff together. And so I had plenty of activities to do, and then then it was that fall, I think we went back to the pageant.
Mm.
And then, in the January of 1954, I got this strange letter, and he said, "Go get me a Kleenex." We picked up some leaves, and my nose is right.
Are you going to tell something secret?
No. So I get this letter, and he said, he's in Trieste. He thought he was going to Korea, and they pulled him off the one cruise ship and sent him to Trieste.
Where is that?
It's by Italy.
Oh.
Italy's the boot, and there was a little island there, and the Yugoslavs and the Italians were fighting, and so they sent one U.S. Army group to try to keep him from fighting the war.
One platoon.
And so he got there in November or December.
But they had it stopped before I got there.
So, and he got he got a flu shot, and then he had a gas stove that exploded in his face, sort of, and
cold stove,
and sort of breathed that stuff in, and then he got sick.
One of those pot belly stoves.
Mm-hmm. So you tell them how they did that,
Well, I went to the dispensary on sick call, and since I had a fever, you had to have a fever before they went. And they had a doctor. We only had one doctor really. It was a black man, a big black man. We had just integrated the services at that same time. So he took an X-ray of my chest, and the heart was grossly enlarged. And he didn't think I'd live through the night, but I did. And so he didn't know what was wrong. He sent me to Stuttgart, to the 5th General Hospital, and happened to get a Salt Lake.
But you went through Switzerland, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to Switzerland on the way. Yeah. This has been going forever,
Okay.
So I had pericarditis, and this doctor in Stuttgart, who was from Salt Lake City, he said, "I can tell you exactly what's going to happen." He says, "You're going to have episodes like this for 5 years, and the episodes will become milder and less frequent, and then they'll go away altogether."
The lining of his heart got a fluid in it, and that's what pericarditis is.
It kept recurring. So he said, nobody knows about it very much, so he says, "I can send you anywhere you want to go if you want to go someplace, to some other hospital." So the closest one I could find to home was in Colorado, in Aurora, Colorado, east of Denver, which was called Fitzsimmons. So they sent me there.
I just wanted to think about getting married when we get home. Well, this is April. He's been in the hospital since January. Well, but I didn't tell you this story. He says, he finally wrote and told us, and he says, "I'm testing mattresses." What is he doing? And then he told us he was sick. Well, Grandma Skidmore got his patriarchal blessing out, and it said, "If you live like you should, your organs will perform as they should." So she never questioned that he was not going to be all right, So anyway, we decided that we would get home. When I was engaged, I had my own money, folks, like I told you, my folks didn't have money, but I had saved my money. I had just bought some new silverware, and I had that. And so the following Friday, he calls me at Budge Clinic in Logan and says, I will be home tomorrow. So Grandpa Skidmore, I came to Logan. I had to work Saturday mornings at Budge Clinic. He came and got me, and we drove to Ogden to the train station, and he was home.
So they released you from the military and medical?
No. They gave me convalescent leave, for 6 weeks out of I think it was. And so during that time we got married. And I went back to the service. And the reason they sent me to the United States for this doctor's orders was to have milder weather conditions. So when I got reassigned from Colorado, it was to mountain and cold weather training.
Camp Hale, which is Leadville. So anyway, the Saturday, well, he was home this week. He was home this week, and on Sunday we decided we'd get married the following Monday, a week from Monday. So we had a week to get married.
Wow!
So he also had a credit to buy a car.
Ah.
So he goes and buys a car.
No, you went with me.
No, he went and bought the car.
No.
Anyway, we got a car. We got a car. Tuesday I had the whole day off, and Grandma Skidmore and my mother and we went over to Hiram and bought a wedding dress, which is downstairs.
I went with them on that too.
No, you didn't.
Forever.
We went ourselves, and we talked to the bishop on Sunday, and he said, "Well, I don't know if the temples are open on Monday, but they were. They were open Monday morning." And my aunt was an officiator in Logan. So we got royal treatment. We were I was the only bride. There was a ceiling, but I was the only bride.
Wow.
So I had a busy week. I took Tuesday, we shopped, and every day at noon I'd go do something, And we decided that we'd get married on a Monday, and then we'd have an open house Thursday. So we'd have a little bit of a honeymoon because he had to go back Saturday. So that's what we did. So I lost weight. So when he got married, I weighed 98 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
And I had bought a skirt, and it just wouldn't hardly stay on, But in my day, your attendants just wore their formals. And, Ruth, my sister Ruth, and Elizabeth had a dress. And, of course, Randall was 5. It didn't matter what he had. And my girlfriend Kay and some others that were there. Not all my girlfriends were in Richmond by this time. And it worked out fine. And we just put a note in the store in Richmond, and people would just pay on a gift. We had some invitations printed, and we sent them out of town to our relatives. And, we had a big crowd, and everything just worked out. So then we go to Salt Lake Monday, and Tuesday night we stay in Salt Lake again. And Tuesday we'd gone down to Payson. That's where my aunt and uncle lived. And we went to Provo, and I bought some shoes. I loved shoes, always had shoes. So then we went back, and then Wednesday we went back and stayed in Richmond because the reception was that night, Thursday night. We had the reception Thursday night. And then Friday, we went to Ogden and stayed all night. And then he went on the train Saturday. And then I had this car. Of course, I also had the bill to pay the payments. I had to make the rest of the payments. I think we only financed her for a year. But we had this 50 Chrysler.
But she had extra money too. Since I was married, I got money every month.
For him being in the Army.
So that was it. So then that was May 10th, and then he's home a week. And then the first part of June he called, and he got a leave.
Yeah, that's when I got the convalescent.
Yeah. So he came home, and the boss at Budge Clinic had apartments to rent. He rented out to Utah State students. And of course, they were free in the summer, and so he let us move into one of their apartments for a month.
No,
They
it
were
wasn't
free.
Wasn't free.
No, I meant they were free of
They were
tenants.
available.
Oh,
I meant they were available.
They're available.
So
That wasn't
we
very
lived,
much.
but that was sort of hard because, you know, he didn't have to do anything and I was working it, but it worked out. So then he took the car back. Well, he got sick and he had to go back instead of to Fort Hale. I mean, to Camp Hale, he had to go back to Fort Carson, which
Went
is
back to
he went back to
to
Fitzsimmons.
Denver, yeah.
He had another episode.
Oh, went back to the hospital.
And so then he was
So
on
they had
AWOL.
AWOL for a little while.
from Camp Lee. And then finally, in September, he came home. And we went, Labor Day weekend, we moved to Colorado, to Red Cliff, Colorado.
So you'd only been married for like 5 days when Grandpa had to go back to the service?
That's about
For the
right.
rest of the month. And
Wow.
then in June, he was home. And then we went back the end of June. And then we got together in the 1st of September.
Wow.
And we were there until February when he was discharged. But this worked just that way. When he was in college, we went to a heart specialist in Logan because he got it. And about 5 years he had it. And they said if you were a banker or something, you could work right through it. You know, they would each episode would get it was less severe. So then we came home from the service and rented a house right next to my folks. And this was in February, and we stayed there till September. And then we moved to Logan, and I was expecting Farrell. He went to graduate school a year, too, so we lived in Logan. And we moved to Brigham in the summer of 57. Farrell was born in 55 on his birthday, and then Mark was born in 56, and Lorna was born in 57. And we moved over. We had us over here. And my folks, my dad would close the service station around 7 or so, and go home and get a bite to eat. They would drive to Brigham, come and see us, and we'd have to wake up Mark and Farrell. And they'd be so good, they'd wake up and play with their grandpa and grandma. And then they'd leave, we'd put them back to bed, and they'd go to bed.
Oh, that's fun.
So they did that many times. They just, they wanted to see that was a little boy. Well, in the meantime, Ruth got married a year later, and she had a year after that, she had a girl. So then they had the three of them. Susan and Mark were the same age, but so it's funny. So tell about your family.
Tell about my family. What do you want to know about my family?
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your pioneer heritage.
Well, yeah. Actually, my grandpa, Skidmore, and my great-grandpa, Thornley, were in the same pioneer company from across the plains. I'm not sure. They must have known each other.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name. What was the name of the company?
I don't remember.
John something.
But, Grandpa Skidmore was 9.
My grandpa Skidmore, William Lobart Skidmore, was born in Philadelphia in 1844. And he was baptized when he was 8 years old in Philadelphia. And then he and his mother and
Just make it faster. You don't.
and 3 of his brothers decided to come to Utah. So they crossed the plains probably in 1855. And he was about 9 years old. He walked all the way. He felt like it was just a big summer camp out. He enjoyed it. It was fun. And when they got to Salt Lake, there wasn't any work. There was very little food. Everything was scarce. And so my great-grandmother made arrangements for my grandpa, who was her son, to live with Beeson Lewis and his wife, who agreed to take him and treat him like he was their son. And first he went with Sister Lewis, and they lived out in Tooele in a cabin, and he herded horses out there. The horses that he herded belonged to the United States government, and they were used for stagecoaches, primarily to haul the mail. And stagecoaches would come in, and the horses would be all tired, and so they would take the old tired horses and rest them up and feed them up and get them ready to go back. So it was kind of a recycle operation. And he quite liked that work, I think. He was really small. He was red-headed. The Indians, since he was red-handed, didn't molest him very much. The other herd boys his age would run into quite a bit of difficulty with Indians. Then Mr. Lewis decided he was going to move north and asked Grandpa if he wanted to go with him. And he decided he would. So they took all of their animals and provisions and left Tooele and Salt Lake City and came north. And they camped out here by Perry for 3 weeks. And then they went over the canyon and up to Richmond. And so my grandpa Skidmore was one of the ones who lived in the original fort in Richmond. So he was one of the founders of Richmond. And great-grandpa Thornley, by the way, was one of the founders of Smithfield, which is one city south of there. And when Grandpa Skidmore got married, Easton Lewis gave him 10 acres of land and a team of horses. So he started as a farmer in Richmond. And he became bishop, and was bishop for 20 years. And the tithing was given in kind. That means 1 load of hay out of 10 or 1 cow in 10. He had to have a farmyard and a barnyard just to take care of the tithing. And they would take the excess tithing to Logan once every week. Then he was asked to marry a second wife, and the second wife he married became my grandmother. And she came from Sweden. She was converted in Sweden and joined the church, and then against her parents' wishes she came to America, to Utah, and she came to Logan because she had a sponsor in Logan. And she started waiting on tables and assisting in a hotel. And she didn't like that work very, very much. And so when the brethren found this out, they somehow made arrangements for her to come and live with Grandpa and to help take care of his house and the children of the first wife. And then eventually she and Grandpa got married. So this was a polygamous marriage. They had two wives. And, she had 6 children, and the first wife, I think, had 12. And they were having children at the same time and helping each other. The first wife died before my grandma did, and so she took care of 2 sets of children for a while.
But I always felt so sad for her. She came over here. We never saw her parents again.
Her name was Charlotta Wilhelmina Pearson.
But, 24, and married, into this family. Never saw her children, and when they got married, and the federal marshals were coming, for the polygamists, so they moved her up to Idaho, and I think she was there when she had her first baby, and it died. So I just felt so sorry, and then she thought she would live to take care of Grandpa, and she got breast cancer and died. She went down to see Uncle Earl, which was one of Grandpa's half-uncles, and he was a doctor, and he couldn't save her. She got too far. So she died before Grandpa did, so, she wasn't there to help.
My dad's name was
old age.
Cyrus Skidmore, and he was the youngest of the 18 children.
Wow.
So that's one reason that I have a grandpa who was a pioneer when most people my age have a great-grandpa or a great-great-grandpa who was a pioneer. My grandpa and Doreen's great-great-grandpa were good friends. Simon Webb and William Lobar Skidmore were good friends. Simon Webb was a little older than my grandpa, but they were good friends. In fact, one of Simon Webb's wives was my grandpa's niece. He had several brothers, like I said, and one of them was Samuel, who settled here in Boxelder County. And so they were brothers. And so
there's another Samuel Skidmore besides Caleb's Samuel.
Oh, yeah.
And we know at least two people here in the Brigham City area who are grandchildren of Samuel. But they're not named Skidmore, they're named Wild and Brighton.
So this is what's interesting, that Grandpa Skidmore was a bishop, and Skip, because I wasn't, and then Bill was, and now Farrell is.
Yeah.
So this is sort of special.
Bishop Skidmore's.
Yeah, that's right.
The only grandparent I really knew was my mother's mother.
Oh, okay.
My Grandpa Skidmore didn't die until I was almost 4. Yeah, he died in 1933, and I was born in 29. I was born in October and he died in September, so I was just almost 4.
Okay.
But they tell me that he used to sit in a rocking chair on the front porch. The house where he lived is still there, and the one where I was born. Interesting, we were both born in our grandpa's houses.
Wow.
And our paternal grandpa's houses.
Yeah.
No, it's your maternal grandpa. So, the houses of both grandpas are still in existence. Hers in Providence and mine in Richmond. And we had to move out of Grandpa's house after he died, so I think it was about when I was 5 that we had to move out. We just moved a block away. And we still sometimes shared the same barn with my dad's brother, who was Uncle Alvin. So my dad was a farmer all his life, and I grew up on a small farm. And often would stop at Grandpa Hendrick's service station. But he wasn't my grandpa either. He was a nice guy. He was always really friendly and very meticulous in taking care of vehicles and stuff.
And that was in Richmond. You had a service station.
Had 3 service stations in Richmond.
They had a struggle, you know.
I guess there's still, 2?
But Grandpa, my mother's maiden name was Pickett, and Grandpa was raised in Tooele. George Pickett was raised in Tooele. And Bridget Brown was from Tooele. So he knew him well. And then my Grandma Pickett somehow they met together in Providence. And Grandma Pickett had a big family, and in the flu epidemic in 1918 she died. And my mother was 12. And they couldn't hold public funerals. This is when Joseph F. Smith died. So they had the funeral out on the lawn. It was cold January day when Grandma died. And so when Mother died at 92, she hadn't seen her mother for 80 years.
Wow.
So that was really hard on my mother. But my mother came from a big family, and they were so devoted to Grandpa. They went down to Providence and clean his house and go sing and just worshipped him, you know. He took the first place I ever saw National Geographic. He had a whole stack of them, and he took it for it. He was liked to read a lot, and he was a blacksmith. And he and his father made a covered wagon that was presented to Denmark in memory of the saints. And I think it was in a museum in Copenhagen.
Oh.
Because they were blacksmiths. But John Pickett, my great-great-grandfather, he was a freighter. He went across the plains many, many times. In fact, this names that you said pull up the different families or the different pioneer companies. It has John Warren Pickett several times because he went back and forth quite a bit.
Oh,
That's really neat.
So, but I knew my grandpa Pickett. He died a year after I was married. He died. But the thing that was nice is Dad finally, after Bill got on at Diacol, and Dad could see that he just, he'd do pretty good in the summer, but then every winter was practically borrow money to pay rent on the service station. So he went to Diacol too. And so he was out here quite a while. Then he got laid off, but he got on at they had the Trackmaster plant in Logan. And so that was close for him. And he retired from there. And it was the biggest blessing of their life because they had never had health insurance. And even though he only worked a few years and he didn't make much money, and so he only got a little retirement, but he had health insurance. To the day they died, both of them, and never paid a cent for it.
Wow.
And he had some surgeries, mother had surgeries, and they just paid for their medicines. And it was just a big blessing in their life. I don't know how they would have done it if they hadn't had insurance.
Wow.
So it was just a blessing to them. And so their last few years, they were able to do what, more or less, they never had a brand new car. But they had newer cars, than when I started to drive, and they got to go on lots of trips. They never got to California, but they went to we lived in Portland, so they went back to Portland. They went to Yellowstone. They flew. We finally got them to fly to Connecticut to see Elizabeth. And Ruth and I got down we got him on the plane. He said, well, he's got to go. The door's shut. He's got to stay on. Yeah, come on. Well, when he came home, you thought he was the only one that ever flew. He tried to tell us everything that happened. And they flew other places after that.
One time we traded cars. We had a Chrysler that we bought new. And after we traded cars, he came over here and bought it from the dealer.
Really?
I think he was prouder of that car than any car he ever
Why
had.
didn't he just buy it from you?
Yeah. They did fix a few things. He just got thinking about it.
It wasn't a very good financial deal.
But, they fixed
the price about $2,000.
They fixed it up, and so he had it until he couldn't drive anymore. So it turned out to be really good for him, and he loved that car.
That was funny.
When he was in the nursing home, we'd go up to Richmond and get Grandma Hendricks, and then she'd want us to drive his car, and we'd drive it down to see him. And we'd tell him we got the car out, and he asked me about the air and the tires and stuff like that.
Even though he got senile, you couldn't have missed him up on the car. He still knew everything. He asked him about everything about that car. Bill, did you do this? Did you do that?
Actually, I had done a lot more than he had on that same car.
Yeah, that's it.
Maybe that's where John gets it from.
There was a Chrysler LeBaron. I can't remember what year it
It
was.
had turbo.
Yeah, it had a
We
turbo.
bought it brand new. It was white with blue interior.
It was a really nice car.
Wow.
It wasn't as nice as the tan one, the one that talked to you.
Yeah, I remember that one.
What was it called?
Your door is ajar.
Mark wanted it, so we were getting a new car, and so we drove it. Nancy came here. Nancy and Laura flew here, and she and Bill and Laura drove that Chrysler back to Caleb to have.
Straight through in shifts.
It was called Rosewood. It was such a pretty color. We had lots of cars in the first few years of our marriage.
Mm.
We don't talk about all of them.
I want you to, one other thing I want you to, just to tell you, my grandpa got my Hendricks. I was the first grandchild. And they just, nothing was, that I should just have this and this. Not that they got a lot of stuff, but they were very, very good grandparents. And we lived in the same ward and a block away, and they just thought that was so neat. And then Grandma got
They kept her in the shoebox.
Well, I only weighed
By
3
the
pounds.
stove, so she'd keep warm, like an incubator.
Whoa.
And so they were good. They just, Grandma just couldn't wait till I could drive. She just wanted me to drive. She loved to shop. And that poor Grandpa, she frustrated. She'd been raised with more money than Grandpa had, and he had a hard time curbing her in.
Which grandma and grandpa?
Grandma Hendricks,
Okay.
Lafayette and Lizzie.
I thought it sounded like that.
That's right. Her dad and mom, neither one of them shopped, but her dad wouldn't let her mom have any
Dad had a funny thing. Well, you have to realize that Dad...
She spent $10 on groceries.
What am I going to do with her?
Coming to?
Well, this was when Grandpa, my Alton, got senile. He just really, the last while, and he just got the idea they didn't have any money. And we'd call the bank, and I'd say, Dad, you got plenty of money. Well, I hope you're right. And I'd sit down to write some checks, when he got this way, and he'd say, Doreen, what are you doing? And I says, well, you've got to pay the homeowner's policy and this and that. And he says, you're going to have us overdrawn. He'd never been overdrawn in his life, but he was just sure that I was spending all the money for him. And
she'd say, you got plenty of money. He said,
I hope you're right, he'd say.
I said, I wish that was true.
But he reverted back to how things were so tight.
Yeah.
And when Mother he told Ruth one day, I know what I'm going to do with your mother. I gave her $10 the other day, and she wants more money for groceries. And he just reverted back to, Depression days. So after he died, she says something about she needed some clothes. I says, Mother, you've got plenty of money. Go get you what you need, And she'd get her money back from her medicine, from the insurance. And I'd say, here, you can just spend your money, But she just, Dad had the service station, and he just had one account. My mother never wrote a check. Never had written a check in her life. And she finally had to write the check for the fast offering. She could wait. I could do the tithing when I came over. If she had to, she could write one. She knew how. She, having quit school when she's a sophomore, she didn't have much confidence on scholastic things.
Well, she was really sharp.
But she never lost her memory. She knew everything. But especially math, she was just, and Dad having the money, and he handled it, and he kept her on a tight rein. And he wasn't stingy with her. It's just they didn't ever make a lot.
Yeah.
And then when he got older and they had all these nice trips, and they had nice cars, and he took care of everything so good, and so they finally got to do some things. But then when he got real senile, that was one of the things that he could not realize they had money, and didn't know why she was spending so much, or why I was going to write out this big check for the homeowners. I said, you gotta have homeowners insurance, So it was so sad.
Yeah.
And then, but two of my aunts had some Grandma Hendricks had senility, Elizabeth, and poor Grandpa. He worked till he was 72 at the Seagull Mill. Come home one day and she's trying to light a fire in her oven. She thought it was her coal stove.
Oh.
And so Grandpa finally retired. And one night he called Dad, and he says, Alton, your mother's gone. And he'd gone in to take a bath, and she had loaded up her silverware in her dishpan And she was walking up to where she used to live. And, this was Elizabeth, Aunt Lizzie, they called her. And so Grandpa just had to keep, she just got senile. And, Dad, he'd be in the nursing home with the fractured hip and that, and we'd go get him to take him out. And Bill would say purposely to the nurse, now when do you need Alton back? And he'd say 3 o'clock. And so then we never had any problem with him going back, because he knew he had to be back by 3 o'clock. Otherwise,
he thought he was going back to work at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, he just. And yet, if you asked him about the car, his mind was A1.
It's bizarre.
Yeah, it is.
I remember great Grandma Hendricks. You guys would bring her up to Bear Lake.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember, what year did great grandpa die?
He died in 96. And she died in 97.
Yeah, and I met him too.
Yeah.
And I think I was alive when your mother passed away.
She died in 90.
Yeah.
I remember Cammie at the funerals.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I remember Cammie and Chase looked at the casket. I could see Chase and Cammie.
Yeah.